At the start of the movie, we meet Annie, a rich and pretty girl who has just arrived from abroad to meet her dream guy, Haran. Annie decides to join the same school as Haran to try to win his heart. Elsewhere, a clumsy, bespectacled girl from a middle-class family named Millie is woken up by her screaming father as she is late for school. Millie sluggishly gets out of her bed and readies for school. Like any other middle-class family, she struggles to get into the overcrowded local bus. Sadly, Millie gets pushed off the bus and she runs even more late for school. Thankfully, a taxi passes by and Millie gets a lift. On the way, she excitedly listens to her favorite artist, Gian, on the radio. The scene then cuts to the school balcony where some boys are peeping through a telescope to see the girls below, when Haran, Annie's dream guy, arrives on his bike. The girls around him immediately begin to blush. Just then, Haran gets a call from Annie, but he doesn't pick it up because he doesn't like her. Soon enough, Annie also arrives at the school premise and continues calling Haran. Seeing such a beautiful girl at the school, some boys approach her and decide to help her out. Meanwhile, Millie arrives at the school gate in a hurry as she has to go to the bathroom. On the way, she bumps into Annie and they both fall to the ground. Annie is already irritated, so she scolds Millie before going on her way. In the next scene, a desperate Millie heads inside the bathroom, not realizing that she went inside the boys section. Just when she relieves herself, she gets a call from her father. Millie picks up the call and assures her father that she has reached the school safely and on time. Unbeknownst to her, there is a boy next to her in the bathroom stall. Hearing the girl's voice, the boy wonders if he's in the girls' washroom. Millie finishes off and tries to wash her hands. However, she can't find the soap. Just then, Haran arrives at the scene and she finally realizes that she's in the boys' washroom. Nonetheless, she doesn't care much and simply heads out. While she is leaving, Haran notices a dinosaur sticker on Millie's bag. Later, she goes to the paleontology department for admission. On the way, she once again comes across Annie, and this time she recognizes her. Millie begins apologizing to Annie, but the latter is in no mood to entertain her. She completely ignores Millie and continues to look for Haran. At the paleontology department, the professor is busy talking on his phone, so he doesn't hear Millie knocking at the door outside. She attempts to push it herself, but the door is very tight. Frustrated, she uses all her might and finally opens it, but ends up falling right below the professor's office desk. At the same time, Annie also arrives there. The professor ignores Millie and courteously welcomes such a pretty girl. He begins explaining that Annie is the only girl in the paleontology department and that she should be fortunate enough to have a professor like him. Annie clears the misunderstanding and says that she's just here to look for Haran, not to get admission into the department. Meanwhile, Millie gets back on her feet and attempts to introduce herself to the professor. However, she is again ignored. Instead, the professor tells Annie Haran's whereabouts before she leaves the office. After a while, Millie finally gets to have a decent conversation with the professor. It turns out she is the only girl in the paleontology department. The professor then hands over a registration form, and upon checking it, Millie learns that she has to get a stamp from the class advisor. So she quickly heads outside without listening to her professor properly. For the next 15 minutes, she searches the whole school to look for her class advisor, but to no avail. Tired, she returns to the professor's office and shares her misfortune. The latter then clarifies that he is also the class advisor, and it was her fault for not listening to him carefully earlier. He puts a stamp on Millie's registration form and advises her to submit it to the department head. This time as well, Millie doesn't listen to him carefully and hurries her way out to search for the department head. Once again, Millie vainly looks for the head around the school. She gives up and goes back to the professor's office, where he is just waiting for her to clear the misunderstanding. It turns out that the professor is both the advisor and the department head of paleontology, and that there is only one office for such a course. Elsewhere, Haran gets a call from his mom letting him know that Annie has arrived at the school. Just then, he notices Annie, but instead of interacting, he hides from her. Next, the professor and Millie arrive at a location and begin examining a dinosaur skeleton. The professor explains that Haran is the top student in the class and that Millie has much to learn from him. Unfortunately, while examining the skeleton, she accidentally knocks it over, breaking it into pieces. Fed up with her clumsiness, the professor advises Haran to accompany Millie to the girls' hostel. Annie happens to be at the hostel as well, so she finally sees her obsession. Haran, having been seen, cannot hide away quickly, so he decides to chat with her in the cafeteria. In the next scene, Annie begins telling Haran that she came all the way from New York just to see him. However, Haran doesn't care and brushes her off and says that she shouldn't have done so. Meanwhile, Millie also arrives at the cafeteria but gets bullied by some popular girls at school. She gets tripped and hurts her leg. Seeing this, Haran tries to help her, but Annie interrupts him. Later, a classmate approaches Millie to inform her that they are having a welcoming event later that evening, and everybody has to wear a special costume. Excited, Millie goes home and begins searching for a costume. Her father recommends that she wear a dinosaur outfit as he believes it will make her stand out. Millie doesn't love the idea, but she reluctantly agrees. However, it turns out that the classmate from earlier had lied to Millie about the costumes, and the party was in fact just a regular party. When she arrives in her dinosaur outfit, everyone starts making fun of her. Fortunately, her father arrives in the nick of time wearing a superhero costume and escorts her away. The next day at school, all the department heads are gathered around for a meeting. They are organizing the annual beauty competition. One of the teachers mocks the paleontology professor for not having any female students participate in the contest. Fuming, the professor says that he is a new female student and she will be competing in the pageant. Meanwhile, in the classroom, Millie is busy dreaming about her crush, RJ Jian, when she is snapped out of it by her professor. The latter sees that she is a big fan of Jian, so he persuades her to take part in the contest by saying that Jian will be one of the judges and she will get to meet him in person. Hearing this, Millie immediately goes to sign up for the competition. Later that day, it rains heavily, so Millie is stuck at the school as she doesn't have an umbrella. But for Annie, a line of boys are waiting for her to choose one of their umbrellas. However, Annie will only accept Haran's umbrella, so she waits for him. A while later, he arrives at the scene and, to everyone's surprise, offers his umbrella to Millie. This causes some friction between him and Annie, and seeing this, the innocent Millie heads out in the pouring rain. Haran finds it very cute, so he leaves his umbrella and joins her. Once home, Millie tells her father about the competition. He is skeptical at first, but then he begins teaching her to dance and perform for the audition. On the day of the audition, all the participants perform their talents, with Annie being at the top of the list. Millie performs her weird dinosaur dance, and as expected, everybody makes fun of her. However, Haran, who is also in the audience, is entertained by her performance. Meanwhile, the school judges are about to eliminate Millie from the contest, but the professor begs them not to do so, claiming that it would damage the department's reputation. Hence, they reluctantly agree to advance Millie to the next round. Following the audition, the girls who were eliminated in the first round begin taunting Millie, questioning how she got into the next round when she is such an ugly hag. However, she simply ignores them and goes about her ways. In the next scene, the participants gather around the swimming pool to practice their catwalk struts. Since Millie doesn't know how to walk in high heels, she falls into the water. Seeing this, Haran immediately jumps in the pool and gets her out. He then gives her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and thankfully, Millie wakes up. But when she sees the handsome Haran above her, she immediately gets on her feet and flees. Next, Millie overhears her professor talking on the phone and learns that it was because of him that she advanced in the competition. As a result, she begins to wonder if all those ugly comments by her classmates are true. The following day, Millie confronts her professor, deciding not to participate in the competition anymore. Hearing this, the latter is left in shock, as he is very concerned about the department's reputation. Later in class, the professor tells the students that he has just found an old map which leads to a rare artifact. He wants the boys to find it and bring it to him. Millie says that the boys are good for nothing, so she wants to join the search party. Reluctantly, the professor decides to let her join. Soon enough, the students gear up for their mission. On their way, they come across a sheikh and his daughter. That evening, the students decide to spend the night with their new friends. They dance and have fun all night long. Unfortunately, when they wake up in the morning, their Jeep is nowhere to be seen. It turns out that the sheikh and his supposed daughter have stolen the vehicle, leaving the poor students all alone and stranded in the desert. They warily travel across the desolate place and finally come across the huge castle containing the artifact. Excited, they go inside the building and look at the statues and ruins. One of Haran's friends accidentally knocks into a statue, which causes a door to open right in front of them. The fascinated friends then go inside and watch the strange interior of the building. At the same time, another friend accidentally steps on a button and seals Haran and Millie inside a cave-like room. Scared, the friends outside begin to press random buttons, causing Haran and Millie to face the triggered booby traps inside. At one point, the couple is bombarded by sharp spears, and Haran tries his best to protect her. Once the commotion is over, the duo sees a strange door and finds the artifact they're searching for. But when Haran picks it up, the earth begins to quake. They somehow manage to escape the place, only to be surrounded by a strange indigenous group. Both Haran and Millie are subdued and taken to their queen, named Kenny, who happens to be none other than the doppelganger of Annie. Like her original, Kenny falls in love with Haran at first sight, so she takes him to her private room. Meanwhile, Millie has to duel with Kenny's bodyguard. Just when she is about to be sliced by the muscular guy, Haran arrives at the scene, having subdued Kenny and her side piece. Unfortunately, despite his best efforts, Haran alone cannot take down the whole indigenous group, so he and Millie are once again taken under control. They are then each tied to a wooden pole and left to be executed in the morning. As night falls, Millie begins realizing she is about to die, so she asks Haran if he likes Annie, the perfect girl in the school. Haran replies that he isn't into Annie, but instead he likes someone who is clumsy and wears spectacles. Hearing this, Millie realizes he's talking about her, so she blushes shyly. The following morning, Millie is taken to the place of execution. Just when it appears as if she is going to be finished off, Haran frees himself from his shackles and once again saves her. Together, they fight the captors and successfully escape. Thankfully, once they reach the desert, they see their friends waiting for them in the jeep. So, all of them make it out alive and safe. The following day, Haran and Millie take the artifact to the professor, only to find out that it was a fake, and that he had assigned the task so that the students can entertain themselves on the trip. Later, Millie learns that she actually made it to the second round because of her own ability and not because of the professor's help. So, she decides to take part in it once again, and Haran even offers to give her a makeover. Once it's done, Millie's look is completely changed, and Haran's affections for her grow even more. In the second round of the contest, Millie successfully captures the judges' hearts, including her crush Jian's, and makes it to the final round. After the show, she excitedly greets Jian and talks about how big a fan she is. Meanwhile, Haran, who had just bought flowers for Millie, sees this and storms away in jealousy. He bumps into Annie on the way and offers the flowers to her instead to make Millie jealous. However, Haran later confronts Annie saying that he doesn't like her and tells her to stop bothering him. Furious and sad at the same time, Annie becomes determined to win the competition, so she tries to seduce Jian. However, her charm doesn't work on the judge, so she decides to ruin Millie's performance instead. On the final day, Millie begins her performance, but the evil Annie turns the power off and orders everyone to leave the hall. Since she is the most popular girl in the school, most of the students oblige. But right then, Millie emotionally tells everyone that this is her one chance to perform, so she pleads with them to at least hear her out. She then begins singing her song while Haran takes a seat in the audience. She then slowly goes towards him, and everybody begins cheering them on. The scene then cuts to the following day at school, where Millie and Haran are now officially a couple. Later, she is called upon by the headmaster. Millie is nervous as she believes she is about to be reprimanded for her performance. However, to her surprise, the headmaster reveals that she actually won the competition because of her honesty, hard work, and dedication. The movie ends with our nerdy heroine receiving the prize certificate and celebrating the victory.